Hey, welcome back to the SBP Podcast Mobile Filmmaking. You're listening to episode 117, and I'm your host, Susie Botello. You're now in the Weeds, a mobile filmmaking series. Join filmmaker and script doctor Jason C. Marshall and I as we discuss story formula and structure. Hey, Jason, how are you?
I am all right, Susie. I'm tired because you always get me on podcasts at midnight.
Yeah, it's the time zone. I should do a sound effect for that. The time zone. Jason, even though I get you tired on podcasts, recording at midnight, we should let our listeners know that the last time, the last episode that I was recording, it was literally midnight for me as well.
Right, it was the you were interviewing a Russian gentleman, was it?
Yes. Maxime Muscle. Maxime gets a shout out.
Oh my
2
God,
episodes in a row.
That's an amazing name, Max Muscle.
Yep. He's actually, for listeners, go back please and listen to that episode 116. It's hard to believe we're in 117 already.
Nice.
Like if somebody, if one of you just sort of jumps into this, finds this podcast now and jumps right in, and you said, oh, I want to check out the other podcasts. Some of our friends actually did that, and they would message me and say, I found your podcast, and I'm now listening to all of them. I'm working my way back. That was a possibility maybe when I had 12 episodes. But we are now, that's hard.
I mean, it's not impossible. It's just, you have to really love podcasts.
It's a little crazy. I keep getting the name of our series wrong. I keep switching things around. It's called In the Weeds, Story Formula and Structure. Mm-hmm. I'm literally reading that because I keep switching it and calling it Story Structure because they both start with the ST, I guess. And so it's just I keep getting that. But does it work either way, Jason? It works either way, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay, good. Then we're okay. Well, Jason, first of all, Happy New Year to you.
Yes, 2022.
Yeah, catch 22.
Let's see what fresh hell this year brings.
It should be good. It's already a roller coaster. I'm listening or reading it on social media from people. Some of the trending tweets are that 2022 has already started out wrong for many.
Well, let me tell you, up here in Ontario, we are literally right back where we were a year ago.
What?
Last January, we had fresh lockdowns because COVID cases spiked. It was something like 4,000 a day or whatnot. This time, it was like 10,000 a day before they did anything and put fresh lockdowns in. And I mean, luckily, the amount of people in the ICU is much lower because of vaccination rates and the lighter symptom load of Omicron. But still, there's no reason to be back where we are. So it feels like nothing was learned, and it's very frustrating.
I feel like we hit the 20s with karma. It's like everything just kind of hit us all. I mean, not just with COVID, just everything. It's just been crazy and all over the world. Mm-hmm. It's like evolution on warp speed for society,
Yeah.
for
It's,
this.
It's
This-
whatever. Everything that's happening right now is just not cool.
No, I know. Well, there are some cool things if you're I'm an optimist. So there are some cool things, we just have to get through the bad stuff that leads to the good stuff. Like, for example, Jason, do you cook?
I use meal kits.
All right. That's not cooking as far as I'm concerned. No, but that's still cooking. But let me ask you this. So, do you like peeling potatoes?
No.
Okay, so I like chopping vegetables and things,
Okay.
but I hate peeling stuff. And I have a peeler. It's not
Yeah.
like I'm doing it like, way back in the 1800s or something.
No, but still.
But still, I just hate having to peel things, And a lot of times I'll just wash it really good and say, forget the peeling. It's actually healthier sometimes. But a lot of times, you have to peel things like potatoes. And I hate that part. But I know I'm not going to get what I wanted to make without the peeling. And this might not be the best example, you know what I mean? But that's just the prep part before you get to cooking. I like to cook, but I don't like to prepare unless I'm just chopping vegetables, because I feel like that's part of, like, what do you call that thing? Not yoga. Boy, I'm already starting off with bad...
meditating?
Yes. It's part of meditation is chopping vegetables, I get all into it. But it's the same process, it's like we just got to get through this ugly part before we get to the pretty stuff, Anyway.
That's fair.
Yeah. So all right, what have you got today? Guys, we're always, speaking of learning, we're learning on new ways of presenting this concept. There's a good segue. Of storytelling and screenwriting and making awesome films, because that is why you're really here. You're not really here to listen to me talking about peeling potatoes. Jason,
although that is very appealing.
Oh, now there you go. That's a good one. All right. It is Saturday night here, guys. So please bear with me and Jason. So let's go ahead and share with everyone, not exactly all in detail about what we're going to talk about, because then that takes the fun out of being spontaneous. But what is the real gist of what we're going to be speaking about?
Well, let me tell you, Susie, I am totally unprepared, but we're going to talk about character tonight.
All right. Well, speaking of character, that's incredible. You know what I was thinking about character? Speaking of that, I was thinking about I have to watch movies as part of my job, obviously.
Yeah.
But I also watch movies to break away from the usual movies.
You watch movies to get away from movies?
Yeah. I actually went to the theater and I watched The Matrix.
Okay.
And I actually did not watch it because I wanted to criticize it or do a review or anything like that. I watched it because I haven't been to the theater since COVID began, practically. I think one of the last films, and actually even before then, because I got really busy, but I can't remember the last movie. I remember watching Endgame, and then I remember watching one other movie, but I don't remember what that movie was.
Right.
And so I went to watch The Matrix, and if you guys have watched The Matrix, you might, have different feelings about it, different, opinions about the movie. So I went and I watched it for fun, pure fun. I did not see the Spider-Man one because I felt like, well, everybody's going to be in there watching that one. So I wanted to see the other one. And I've watched all the other ones.
Yeah.
And I love the Matrix movies. But I'm able to do that. I'm able to watch a movie and enjoy the heck out of a movie, just pure entertainment. The only time, now I don't, it doesn't matter story and all that stuff, because especially with, some action flick story, it's like, what? I'm sorry, I was watching the cool explosions and special effects. I forgot about the story. I don't think it mattered to me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to, and The Matrix did have a good story in my opinion, but I'll leave that out. But it's the acting and the characters. If the characters are good and are portrayed with decent acting, I'm okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm not okay with is when everything else is good and the characters are not well depicted.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go into. By the way, did you watch the new Matrix?
I did, and I enjoyed it overall. Although I thought that the midpoint was a little silly when the Merovingian shows up.
Oh yeah.
and then there's this weak ass battle, and then he just like blah, 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 and then he leaves. He's like totally not invested. It's like I'm not invested in this anymore. Goodbye.
I thought there was a lot of it's almost like I think I heard that they're working on another one, that they're considering doing another one, but I feel like that one was kind of a comeback and a last hurrah type of a movie. Mm-hmm. As far as the Matrix stories go, the series, and it just felt like they were throwing back. The one thing I gotta admit, I thought the new Morpheus was a little confusing. They do go back and show the other one in the big screen and everything like that. But what really was strange for me was, oh shoot, what's his name? The other guy that they switched.
Smith?
Yes. Okay, so that was not so clear to me.
See, I actually got that one quite well, but yeah, the Morpheus one was a little weird.
Yeah, but Smith for me was very, very much more like, I mean, they explain it, I'm better looking now and stuff like that. But I mean,
they made me better.
Yeah, but it just seemed like an excuse, you know what I mean, as opposed to anything solid. Mm-hmm. But like I said, it was a fun movie to watch. It was, I mean, it's The Matrix. What the hey, And then the music was also pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm. I'd say it suffered from the opposite because, generally Reloaded and Revolutions weren't real bleh,
entertaining,
weren't well received. But they had a lot. I mean, well, I guess Reloaded had a lot of action. Like the whole second half is like all.
The multiplicity.
Yeah. But then, but this one feels like it suffered from a lack of action.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I mean, I definitely, quite frankly, Neil Patrick Harris was probably the best thing about it.
Oh yeah, his character was freaking awesome.
Yeah, and that's not taking anything away from.
He should play the Riddler in the.
Oh, there you
Batman.
go. Not taking anything away from Keanu Reeves or Carrie-Anne Moss because they're great and it's nice to see them again. But as far as adding a new character, I mean, NPH really kind of stole the show.
Yeah, he totally did, and I mean, love to hate him.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially at the end because he's so good at getting fake beat up.
Yeah.
Like, so when Trinity was smashing him around, all I could think of was his time on How I Met Your Mother and all the episodes where they did the slaps giving.
Yeah. Oh, we're not supposed to be doing.
Oh.
Wait. Yeah, we got to be careful because I don't want people to turn off the podcast because they're like, well, I haven't seen it. You just gave me spoilers, and then they won't listen to all the other good stuff we're going to talk about. But getting beat up doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. Because
obviously everybody gets beat up.
Yeah.
Especially at the end. It was I really enjoyed it. I had fun, and that's all that matters. And I got to go to the movies and enjoy the heck out of it. I didn't eat popcorn. I feel like just gonna throw that out there, but popcorn in theaters has really not been up to par to my expectations from when popcorn at the theaters used to be good. It's like, oh, y'all got that microwave stuff, so we're good. We don't have to make good popcorn anymore. I don't get it. You want popcorn, eat it at home. But yeah, it was a great movie. Okay, Jason, now go ahead. Let's start talking about character.
Oh, let's talk.
And why? Why are we talking about character, Jason?
Well, because it's something that needs to be considered fairly early on. Much earlier than you think. Like, I mean, it's okay. Part of the thing I've been having trouble with is the order of presenting information, because I realized after you and I and Julian talked that we don't.
Oh, that was fun.
It was, but we don't approach our crafting story from a linear perspective. We don't think of, here's the concept, now here's the character, now here's the theme, now here's the structure. It's kind of a jumble that comes at a varying pace. So presenting the information to listeners in a way that makes sense has been kind of an ongoing, what's the best way to approach this? So this is kind of gonna be like an overview, because we're really going to get into character after we get into structure, because so we're going to talk character today, then theme next time, and then we're going to get into really deep
or we might not.
Or we might not.
We might think of something else that could be better.
That's true. That's true. But really, what's better than theme?
Yeah. Well, theme is definitely something that we got to get into. Because that's overall, that's like the wrapper. Yeah.
And that's, I really want to talk about that too, because look, at even now, I've always had trouble with theme. And so it takes me a long time to, sometimes I need to rewatch a few times to really get my head around it. But that's not the conversation for today. Today we're going to continue not talking about character.
That was a teaser. That was a Jason teaser right there, guys.
So there's character and character arc, and they're kind of separate but one and the same. If that makes sense. The character has to have, in a story, not a situation, because situation is, and you can have compelling situational shorts and features where no one grows or changes, but fundamentally story is where there's growth and change, or regression and change, whatever the case may be.
Give us an example of that, Jason.
Which one? Both? Or?
Well, the last one.
Well, I guess, I mean, the best example, even though the content isn't great, is the prequel trilogy of Star Wars, where you watch, Anakin Skywalker have a negative growth arc, where he goes from, the good, wonderful child we meet to Darth Vader. And that's his overall arc over 3 movies. And I will say this, despite the fact that people complain about the prequel series, because it is not great, but I do, if you kind of look at the whole Anakin thing in a bottle, or with the blind, and kind of ignore everything else, it's not a bad story. I do like that you've got this character who was, the Jedi Council let him down right from the beginning and set him up to be manipulated by, well, the guy who turns out to be the Emperor, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, the point is that's the best. That's a really good, because it's so culturally ingrained, pop culture and all that. Everyone talks about Star Wars. Everyone has their feelings on the prequel trilogy, and so if you want to know a negative character arc, go watch the prequel trilogy.
Wow. And they're not long at all, are they?
Do you have a whole day to spend?
Definitely. It's like saying, watch Lord of the Rings, all of them in one day.
Every single
I think there was one of those that was like 4 hours long.
I remember when my wife and I first got together, we watched all 3 extended editions.
Wow.
In one day. Oh my God.
Well, I did that on a weekend. I just had a thing for. I've always, to me, see my most favorite movies in the world, so far, are Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
It's just that world that the world that's created, the stories, it's a very inspiring story. Also, it touches on so much. I just love it. It's my favorite one. My second most favorite one is Star Wars. Probably because I also grew up with Star Wars.
Right.
All of them. Like, it just feels like, oh my God, Star Wars is so epic. I know there are two different groups of people out there. You guys, I know there are two of you. There are Star Wars people and Star Trek people. But I'm more on the Star Wars than the Star Trek side. Star Trek has a big series. It's like the first, the second, the third. The one from the the 50s or the 60s or whatever it was, and then they brought him back, and then they brought him again. Battlestar Galactica to me was more entertaining.
The original or the reboot?
All of them. than Star Trek. But I do like Star Trek, but to me, they're okay. I guess I get bored with them compared to, the other ones.
It's funny. We keep getting sidetracked, but which is fine. If there's any Trek fans listening, they would know there's a whole thing where no one likes Discovery. One of the new shows. It's in its fourth season. Everyone's like, Discovery is terrible. It's not Star Trek. Blah blah blah. Well, I've been rewatching. Okay, because here's the thing: whenever fans are like, it's not Star Trek, you know what they're referring to. They're referring to Next Generation, right. because it's only recently that Deep Space Nine and Voyager really kind of getting their due. But I've been watching some episodes of Next Generation. And I will say anyone who complains about Discovery not being Star Trek can take the rose-colored glasses off and really go back and watch Next Gen, because there's a lot of stinkers in there.
Oh, okay.
There is a lot of stinkers. Although I would say generally great concepts, poor execution.
Technically, you could almost say it's like when people say they had good intentions.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, they had good intentions. So what? It's the end result.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, so sorry, we got sidetracked again. But
that's okay. You know what, guys? Please forgive us. And if you don't like this at all, just let me know. And we'll try to control ourselves a little more next time. Jason, when it comes to character, though, the character development is a huge part of the story development, right? Because, or I shouldn't say story development, the concept.
Yeah.
It's then when you start, like, is it, this is like which one came first, right? The concept or the characters, and then you develop the concept around it, or is it the concept and you develop the
Well, it once again it varies. How does the inspiration strike? I mean, sometimes it's this situation would be interesting. Other times, like, what if a person is in this situation? So
but what if
right.
this happened to me, and then the character, you start with that kind of a character of someone like me, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So it can be, as far as the initial spark, it could be either or. The hardest thing is developing. Gonna be one of those kind of nights, huh?
I don't feel bad now from earlier.
I can speech good. It's the challenge is developing fully fleshed out characters, because the last thing you want to do is have a one-dimensional character. And simply what that means is the character does things either without motivation, like they're an archetype, like that guy's bad so he does bad things, or just
boring predictability.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, you kind of got to look at characters like real people, and as a writer, you really need to observe the real world. But we'll come back to character arc, because it's kind of the bigger thing, because you can't have character arc without developing your character. And there's things. I've got a couple notes here on things you should consider when developing your character. Now, this is not fully fleshed out, because I'm actually still, as I said before, still developing this, and we're going to get into it much deeper after we go through structure. But in no particular order, here we go. Are you ready?
Yep.
We'll call it the facade, and that's basically the outward appearance, what your character presents to the world. Is your character the kind of person who lets everyone know that they're a wine snob? Or, how do they dress? How do they act? What car do they drive? What's their hairstyle? Everything about just as in real life, everything about how a person puts themselves together, is meant to convey an image that they want people to pick up on. So their facade, that's kind of one thing. It's like, okay, well, but once again, you can't do that in isolation. So you need to consider their backstory. Now, you don't have to write a whole biography, but you need to.
Well, and we talked about that before, because we connect with different aspects of a person, and by connecting, we know them.
Yeah. Exactly. So, you definitely, and you want to develop a backstory, but you don't not just willy nilly, because it needs to come, the backstory needs.
I always like that term.
The backstory needs to come back to character arc, and simply what that means is that, generally speaking, and I'm going to use, because where you and I are going to use this, and because I was talking about it with the team over at Never's podcast today. Serenity, Malcolm Reynolds, the main character, has a backstory. He fought in the War for Independence, in the future independence. And they fought a battle at Serenity Valley, and everyone was killed except him and Zoe, who's his first officer on his ship, the Serenity. Malcolm Reynolds presents himself and acts a certain way because of past trauma. The trauma is that he was at one point an idealist, and then losing the war broke him, essentially. So he in the movie, he even says, I have no rudder, whatever way the wind blows, I go. So he's a directionless man now, with no belief in anything, because of this past trauma during the War for Independence and the Battle of Serenity Valley, et cetera, et cetera. And that backstory, that past, informs every bit of who he is now. Once again, how he, the facade, the backstory informs us, and that's metered out over the course of the movie, as it should be in any good movie. You don't spell it all out immediately, because there's no fun in that.
Well, no, and still, it's a movie. You want people to watch the whole thing as it's developing. For mobile filmmaking, I do want to stress that to our listeners, that when you are writing a script, when you are developing your concept, and I know we touched on this, I think with Julian, didn't we? That you want to consider the fact that you are writing these, and you're going to make a movie out of this, because part of the reason we're doing this is not just for, of course it's great for screenwriters, to learn all this, but of course what we're trying to do is see, it's happening all over town here. We are trying to actually inspire people to make movies, filmmakers, especially short filmmakers, to go into features or to make better films. You know, that is the purpose. Engaging films. You want to make the films that everyone talks about, that no one forgets, that people keep rolling around in their head. And these are the elements that you need in order to do that, to think about, because you're beyond just pressing record and then to see what happens, you know, type thing. And I don't think anyone that's made a movie, even the shortest with a mobile phone, does that, you know, particularly. But by putting more into it, you get more out of it, basically.
I will say that, I mean, it's and it's not just you know, as you're saying, you know, anyone who, whether it's a mobile phone
The theme of this episode. how we can't speak.
Oh my god, your mobile phone. Excuse me, let me regroup here. Whether it's mobile or DSLR or even people who get a budget together and shoot on film, it's there's not enough emphasis put on story and all the elements that go into it, and I do believe that most people come by it honestly, because you're influenced by your peers, and if your peers aren't talking about the importance of story but the importance of equipment or this or that, well, that's where you're going to go, because that's kind of what the herd mentality is. And so having these conversations is good, because we can get this other perspective out there, that this is more important than your camera, because your concept is the start. The theme is the idea you want to express, but you have to develop your character, and you have to do it early on, because the character is the catalyst that empowers everything else in the story. And people don't watch for themes; they watch for characters. Yes, they watch for themes, but the character experiences the theme.
We're not also, you know, because a lot of times character-driven films, right, tend to be dramas.
Yeah. Well, I sorry to interrupt. I actually have a thought about that, because I think I know where you're going to go when people talk about, you know, character-driven or plot-driven, and I kind of don't subscribe to that.
Yeah.
In that.
You kind of need both.
Yeah, there isn't one or the other. I guess that there is if you have a situation versus a story. So, excuse that caveat. But
it's also targeting your audience.
Yeah.
What does your audience want to see, right? What types of movies, you know, what type of genre and things like that. But I noticed that even Pirates of the Caribbean, you know, have a romantic or a dramatic, you know, essence to that film as well.
Yeah, the first one especially. Like when you look at the first one, when you break it down, which, you know, at some point we can probably do a condensed version of that. It's a by the numbers structural story. Like it's all there. But what I was going to say is that people talk about plot and character and structure as three different things, but they're not. But they're not, because character and structure result in plot.
Yep. That's kind of like what I was saying earlier, which one comes first type thing. Because all these things, guys, everything comes together as one big mashup. But it's not created that way.
No.
It's like a stew. Going back to cooking.
There are so many, and this is the hard part, because a lot of people assume that, well, I watch movies, so I know how to write a movie. But unfortunately you don't, because there's so many tiny elements that work together and so much nuance that these things we're talking about, there's some people who just have an intrinsic understanding of it and can do it, but the rest of us actually have to work at it, and all these little bits and pieces we talk about are what make a compelling story that people want to watch, and and have an influence on them, you know, whether it's are they just emotionally impacted by it, or are the ideas that you're trying to convey big enough to impact their life in some way?
Well, basically the thing is, quite honestly, is that you have to experience comes by doing, and you have to do it so many times before you become experienced, which also is, expert, part of that ideology that you get good at something by doing, by doing it over and over again. But if you do your best each time, you're going to get better at least. And we've talked about this as well, the concept of failing, through how many times you hit and miss, right? You learn from each one of those times.
Yeah.
But you got to start shooting, basically.
Oh, absolutely.
In order to start doing that. But what I was also meaning to say is, when you're developing that story, right, that you're going to shoot with a mobile phone, you want to keep in your mind that you're going to be shooting this on a phone.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that, because there's certain things that you can take advantage of with the phone that are very hard to do with any other camera unless you have a huge budget, and vice versa, And so by thinking of this in the first place, right from the beginning, all right, I'm writing this and I'm going to create this story and I'm going to make a film, but I'm going to shoot it with phone. It's going to be, I think, a lot better than putting a story, getting it into development and everything like that, and then later going, we're going to have to make this with a phone. Let's see how we can get this done. Because that can hurt the story itself. Where the other way, you can enhance the story.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, one of the things that Max was talking about in the last episode, right? Where he was saying something that made me think about it for quite some time. And it makes sense. Movies with a lot of special effects, when you're doing them on a small budget, or on he said a phone. And I think it's geared around the small budget, right? They don't come out well. And we were talking about how cheesy the special effects are. But I've seen that even with some movies on Netflix and things like that. I'm going, oh, come on. You could have done better at, these CGI explosions that look like something you created on a kindergarten, app or something. And these apocalyptic films, that are very cheesy in that way. And I think that's what he was alluding to, was because he was trying to make that point that those science, the science fiction with the special effects and action films and things like that, they don't do well. They're not suited for mobile filmmaking. So I just wanted to get your thought on that.
That's a see. I don't know.
Pretty interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, see, because you kind of stumped me there. In that, I'm trying to formulate my answer. In that, I think it kind of depends on the savvy of the people developing it. I mean,
to a point. I mean, there's special effects that you can do, on set.
Yep.
Obviously, and then that also has to do. It's good to have the editor on set for that. But there's special effects that come with. I mean, you just can't recreate. I mean, I see it all the time in movies. Like those movies I was just talking about, and they're just ridiculous. And it takes you right out of the story because you're just kind of laughing at them.
Sometimes.
But we also talked about, the actors. And that's one good point where you can overlook things like that. If they're not great, you can overlook it if the characters are played by good actors.
You kind of got me there. It's
really interesting. It's something to think about.
Because I think it comes down to the quite frankly, a lot of times the skill of the people you can get on your team, because there are people. So I never actually watched the videos. I kind of skimmed them. But do you remember Martin Scorsese did The Irishman, which I never watched, but I guess
I did watch that.
Okay, but I guess they de-aged a bunch of characters, but it didn't look that good.
I think they did okay on that.
But then someone else came along, like just someone on the internet, and they went ahead, they redid it. They did it on their own time, and they made it look better.
With those apps that are out there?
Or whatever, I mean, or they might have had access to professional level tools. I don't know. All I know is that I think it's not always the tools, it's also the skill the people you can get.
See, that comes to budget. There's one thing I learned in film school is about that, is the time. The time involved. You're always juggling, those two things, in a production. The time, and so if you've got the budget to put somebody with high skills, right, and say to them, because they're going to look at you and say, this is going to take time. And if you don't have it and you can't afford it, then that highly skilled person can only bring your project so far.
Yeah. The other thing too is also sometimes getting lucky enough to have.
And if you're going to go that far, I hate to say this, but why shoot it on a phone at that point, right?
Yeah, I mean it also depends what you want to get out of it. It's like the whole Soderbergh thing, right? Where he shot 2 films on mobile, which is great and all, but I mean. The amount of
he's experimenting and
exactly he wanted to experiment with it, but they don't talk about the amount of post-production effort that went into it.
He did spend a lot of money on those, though.
Yeah,
because he had it and he could.
Yeah, so yeah, he shot on the phone, but I mean, if you have the budget and people, the Hollywood professionals, yeah, well, that's an incomplete thought, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, it again, I mean, look, there's a lot of benefits to mobile filmmaking.
Yeah.
That can be, I mean, even, look, if you're shooting all your films with DSLRs or larger cameras or whatever, and you start shooting films with your mobile phone, and you're doing okay with that, you know what I'm saying? You may end up, your other cameras are going to collect dust, because that happened to me with photographs. Where I have an SLR camera, and it, carrying it around, going to wherever I would go out to the beach and shoot photos and go to parties and shoot photos, blah, 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 blah with that thing. And it was kind of scary on one hand because things could happen to it.
Yeah.
And at the other hand, then I started taking photos with my phone and they worked, right? And I started to forget about my SLR camera pretty much. And for the events, that I go to, and a lot of my photos, I just went out to the pier here in San Diego downtown and took a shot of the Star of India. It's a big ship, that's out there on the dock. And I took a picture of that just so that I can use it in marketing, and I used my phone. Nice. For that. And I know it works well.
It's actually interesting. We're kind of developing a short, as you know, a number of shorts, but one of the things we want to do is we need some B-roll of the character's ex-girlfriend or ex-wife or whatever, as if it was shot on like an old DV cam, but neither of us have a DV cam, and I'm like, well, why don't we shoot on mobile, like that section of it, because mobile can well, we'll just do it in 4:3. We'll do it at the lowest resolution, and it will very easily mimic, cameras from 15 years ago. That lack of depth of field, that kind of everything's in focus.
I look at it like photos because I used to do graphic design as well, where you take the best possible photo, and if you want to degrade it, you can always do it in post.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the funny thing is when you talk about like reducing like using Filmic Pro to reduce a cell phone image to like 480p still looks better than 480p looked in 2004.
Yeah, that's so okay. So that's my thing about filmmaking. You know, there's a lot of filmmaking with different cameras. You know, they talk about, the iPhone 13 Pro Max or the iPhone 13 Pro or the iPhone 12 or look, back in the day, there are millions of movies. If you go on Amazon or Netflix or HBO, whatever, you're watching movies. A lot of them are from the past. And sometimes we get a craving for a movie, right? Because of, we love the film, we love the story, we love the feeling we got watching it, right? And they were shot with, some of them with like ancient cameras.
Yeah.
Compared to today. The cameras of the 80s and the 90s compared to the cameras that we have now. What is that? Boyhood was a movie that I don't know if you watched it, but what I did was there was an article that came out that was super long.
Okay.
And I remember I read the whole thing on my phone, by the way. I ran into this article about that film, and it was shot, with Ethan Hawke and what's her name? The plays the wife. You know which movie I'm talking about, right?
You're talking about Boyhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know much about it.
Okay, so basically the filmmaker, right? This movie was shot between this kid that was, I think he was 8 years old over the span of 10 years, and Ethan Hawke and the actress. I actually don't like saying actress, but
I
the female actor. Anyways, this film, 10 years, right? So he didn't count and run through the family 10 years like most movies do and change characters, right? The little kid, he grows up from the time he's 8 years old all throughout the entire film. And while they're doing that, this is what's really got me all like, oh my God. The guy had to change the cameras as the cameras are getting better from the 90s all the way through.
Okay.
And in the very last scene of the movie, it has this, the kid graduates high school. And he's I think he's like around Joshua Tree or something like that with a couple friends. And they're riding off. And not riding off into the sunset, like that kind of a scene, but with a car. And they've got this beautiful desert scene during the sunset.
Okay.
And it's shot full HD, but the movie started out, and you can see the difference, even though it's subtle. They're talking about that, about the filmmaker was talking about how they had to sort of upgrade their cameras throughout the making of this movie.
Yeah, actually,
and
you can't keep doing that.
And I'm trying to bring people to understand you don't need the latest phone to shoot your movie.
No.
But what you really need is the stuff that's in this series that we're talking about that will help you well above and beyond that. But one other thing that will also help you, especially now, mainly in the series we're talking about narrative films, your actors, the acting. No matter how great of a story you got, no matter how great of a camera you got, if you don't have good acting.
There's actually, it's interesting. I don't know if we talked about this when we talked with Julian, but one thing I realized after watching Hallmark Christmas movies all through December is that okay actors can do really well with a good script, but great actors cannot elevate a garbage script.
I tend to think that they can take almost anything. I wouldn't call it garbage, but I would say, because I don't even think they'll read garbage or it'll, but they can take almost anything, kind of like Picasso, right? Can take crayons and build you paint a masterpiece with it or something,
I wish I could remember I can't remember what the title was. I can't remember what the story was. But I remember there was one we watched that was like 4 well-known, talented actors, but the script was not good, and there was no saving it. Like, but then we watched.
I would almost blame it on the director.
Well, there's that too.
Then why is the director, right, signing on to such a bad script? But if the actors aren't that good, but the director can bring the best out of them, that also, God, there's so much to that.
Yeah. I do like how you brought it back around, though. Very nice, nice, Sue. But yeah, so as far as character goes, there's a number of things that you need, and you need to consider the backstory. You need to consider who they are and how they present themselves. What are their inner demons? What's their worldview? Which all relates back to backstory. Goals and motivations. These are all things to consider, because when people are like, well, what do I do? Well, give your character depth and complexity. Well, how do I do that? I mean, it's
also something you can research.
Yeah, but
you're supposed to.
Well, you are, but it's also an incomplete answer. It's like when like you're talking to people, it's like, well, how do I use Twitter? Well, just have conversations with people. I'm like, well, okay, well, expand, please. Like, make your characters complex. Well, duh. How do I make them complex?
Yeah, it's kind of like, well, how do you make pizza? Well, you put cheese on top of the dough and put it in the oven, dude. It's like, well, okay, but no, come on now.
Yeah, exactly. It's an incomplete answer.
Yeah.
So basically, early on, you need to think about your characters that are going to inhabit basically move the story along, experience the themes that you want to explore. And I would say backstory comes first, because everything else is built off backstory, including the character arc, which is also an extension of theme. But fundamentally, character arc is, do they change and grow? Because most stories are positive arcs. Yeah. Do they grow and change and become a more complete person by the end of the film? Yes or no? You want the answer to be yes. So you give them 2 things. You give them an external challenge, which is fundamentally the plot. In Wonder Woman wants to stop Ares. That's the external goal. The internal goal, which she doesn't know, because the internal goal is to learn that Ares isn't making people bad. People are good and bad. That's just how humans are.
Yeah.
And through the challenges faced in the journey of the external plot goal, she learns the lessons to have her internal growth, which is the world isn't black and white. It's shades of gray. Where there's darkness, there's light, etc., etc.
And now, guys, I don't mean to throw a wrench into this whole thing just when you think you got it. But here's the other thing. You also have to always remember you're making a movie.
Yep.
You got to entertain your target audience. And even and if you can expand, I mean, you focus on your target audience, and then if you get the entire universe of audience, right? That's pretty awesome. But you do want to entertain, Yeah. So while you have to have depth in your story, in your characters, in your concept, in the arc, and all these things, you still, I think a lot of movies, it's kind of like what I was saying earlier about the Matrix. I think they had more fun developing the movie. You know what I mean? The people that got back together and they were like, hey, let's, hey, remember this? Hey, remember that? Let's throw a little line here about this and that. There was a lot of that between the protagonists. But having that in a film, it goes back to this one other thing that I wanted to touch on, Jason, which is something that when we were last talking to you and Julian, it was really evident during that entire conversation. Am I piquing your interest?
Yes.
Getting a good crew together.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yep. Getting a good crew together, and that can be a challenge.
Because the one thing is, you go out to build a crew, right? For you guys that are just getting started, you go out to build a crew, and you want, you're going to make this film. You want the best this, the best that, the best this, and the best that. Wonderful. Go have at it. But here's the thing. If they don't get along, I don't want to curse, but it's what it is, what you end up with, right?
Yes. We've been lucky. I mean, in the past, I've been so lucky because we brought in people who didn't work out so well. But we're kind of at a point now where we have some good go-tos, and we have excellent, on-screen, or not on-screen, behind-the-screen chemistry. And everyone is free to express their opinions, and it really helps us problem solve.
And that shows on the on-screen, too. Even when the two actors, the two characters get along off-screen, it comes into the on-screen.
Yes, it does.
I worked on a film that the two characters off-screen, they were supposed to be in love, and off-screen, they really were not connecting. Let's put it that way. And so it wasn't like they disliked each other. There was just nothing there, and so no chemistry at all. And so you could see it in the film, no matter how hard the director and individually the two actors tried. It just wasn't there.
Yeah. And that's tough.
Yeah. But it's the same with behind the screen, behind the scenes. You've got crew. There's so much between the director and the director of photography.
Yeah.
Because they both have a responsibility to the vision of the film. And so they both, if they don't get along, they'll argue. That's no big deal. That's part of the whole thing. But sometimes they literally do have some big arguments that take time, and the crew's sitting around going, so is this the time that they go, that's it, it's over, right. Everybody quits?
I never had to experience that, luckily.
Yeah, that happens. It really does happen. And I haven't worked on that many films, but I've been lucky enough to experience a lot of things. But I can tell you that even when those things are happening, the films that I've worked on have been really tight when it comes to the crew itself.
That's good.
And that's really, really important, so I'm trying not to keep bringing you out of the character, but I just want to make that point to our listeners that before you even start making movies, you know what kind of movies you like to make. Most directors like making particular genre films. And, start getting your crew together. But yeah, you guys got a good crew, and you've got the good vibes, and now you guys are ready to make some really good things.
Well, that's the goal. That's the goal. We're working toward a few things. Sorry. Kind of flamed out there.
You were just talking about the nevers, and we didn't even talk about that at all in the beginning. So I just want to reference that for people to share, for you to share what that is that you were referring to.
Yeah, the I also, as well as podcasting here with you, I also am a co-host on the Nevers podcast, which is a fan run podcast for the HBO show The Nevers. Now the Nevers is on hold. You know, they just finished the second, because of the pandemic. They finally wrapped up the second half of their first season.
Yeah.
So the crew over at the podcast have been talking about Firefly, kind of a retro review, and I jumped on with them for the conversation about the movie Serenity, because that essentially wraps up the series, and
Nice.
we just did that earlier today. So today's been my podcasting day.
That's also cool. And then you've got another podcast that you're starting with Julian.
Yep, and we're kind of getting a handful full edited now, so we can launch at the beginning of February, early February, something like that. And yeah, I think we've recorded like 7 now, so we've got some content in the can. Just has to get all put together so we can launch and get that rolling, and that's just a conversation about filmmaking from the perspective of all of us at the bottom, the bottom rung looking up, the unseen filmmakers, the newbies, the ones who made a film and don't quite know what to do next. And really, it's just sharing the stories of others, and their experiences, why they work in film, why they're compelled to tell stories, things like that.
Listen, I want to give a quick shout out to some people here,
Okay.
because as you know, we just wrapped up the film festival submissions, and so I do have to publicly give a shout out to. Well, I can't name each one of you. You know who you are, right? Who helped us, including you, Jason, who helped us through that last push during this last week to get the shorts in, because that was the final extended deadline for the short films. And it was good to see. As a matter of fact, one last film made it in at the last, during the last 5 minutes before cutoff. Great.
Just under the wire.
It looks to me like we got some really good films, short films and feature films. I'm really overwhelmed with gratitude because of the efforts that everyone made on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook to share this, however else people shared it. I really appreciate that, and also appreciate everyone who, look, I feel that the films are their babies.
Yep.
And when you hand your baby to a babysitter, for example, one of the things I loved doing when I was a teenager, could you imagine me as a babysitter? The kids didn't want to let me go. But when you hand your kids over, and I'm talking about your films, you want to know that they're in good hands. You want to know that whoever handles them is respecting of you as a human being, as a person behind each film, and they respect the work and the hard work that you put into it, that they somehow see your talent and your skills and see the prospect, right, of what you can do, all those things together. And so I thank all of you for trusting us with your films. We don't take that lightly. And I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Jason. Film Convert, Moondog Labs, Filmic Pro, Engraving Pros, bunch of pros, Star Wars Steampunk Universe, who sponsor our red carpet extravaganza, Swords and Circuitry Studios, and of course Mobile Film Stories. But I wanna also just thank if you go to our website, internationalmobilefilmfestival.com, and you go to the MFF page, or you can literally just go put this in your browsers, MFF2022sandiego.com, which is also the hashtag for this year's film festival. You're going to see a link there for the judges. And we've got 2 panels of judges, and they are like just twirling their hands right now waiting because they are excited and they can't wait to get those films and to judge them.
Yeah.
To rate them. And yeah, they're really excited about that. Jennifer Zhang, Errol Trotman Harewood, Randy Davison, Stephen Palmer Peterson, those are all for the feature films. And then for the short films are Maxine Muscle, who we just talked about, our friend Ann Pruitt, Ross Perkins, Robert David Duncan, and Kimberly Hart. So I think I've given the shout outs to everybody that I can, but I also got to give shout out to our ambassadors. Jason, I love these guys. So our honorary ambassadors from The Hobbit, Nori and Dory, Jed Brophy and Mark Hadlow. Also Rich Visor and Aaron Nabus. So I just wanted to thank everybody for doing that. And again, thank you also for all your support and for being on this podcast, Jason, because you're giving, this is, you know, for some of you who don't know it, you can download this episode and all the other episodes, and you can have them for life. Our gift to you.
The gift that keeps on giving.
Right? So it's like having audiobooks in a way, and you can play them back at your own free will, take notes, go back to them, because Jason says things, and they're pretty smart things.
Mostly. Sometimes I flub it and you get mobile foam.
Yeah, mobile foam. Yeah, we did have a lot of fun with our. Those were all intentional, you guys.
It's a comedy podcast now.
Yeah, we might have to title it something like. No, I'm just kidding. Well, hey, you have anything else you'd like to say?
Just that these are. Listen, tonight was kind of just a general overview of things to consider when looking at character, and we will get much deeper into them later, but just consider character early on, who they are, what they want, why they want it, and keep on writing.
Definitely. And speaking of character, what are you all doing next week when we publish this podcast? But if you're listening to it now, who are you going to share it with? Give us a tag and a tweet at SBP Podcast on Facebook and on Twitter. And Mobile Film SD on Instagram. And we'll see you guys on the next one. Say goodbye to our listeners, Jason.
Goodbye, listeners.